Hey everyone, welcome back. Ready to get a little uncomfortable.
Oh, a little discomfort is good for the soul, right?
That's what we're banking on today. We're diving into a topic that might make some folks squirm. Quitting, but, and here's the twist, doing it strategically.
Quitting. It's one of those words, right? Almost like a taboo.
Huge taboo.
Yeah.
But our guide for this adventure, Seth Godin, he says it's all about knowing when to quit.
And when to stick, right?
Exactly. We're pulling wisdom from his book, The Dip.
A classic. And his argument is really compelling. He says being able to quit well is just as important as knowing how to push through. It's two sides of the same coin.
Totally. And he makes this really bold claim. Aim to be the best in the world at what you do.
Now, that might sound a little, well, intimidating at first.
Yeah, it definitely caught my attention.
Right. But he doesn't necessarily mean best in the entire universe, more like dominating your niche, your specific area.
Okay, so being the top dog in your field, but why is that so crucial? Like, why not just aim for pretty good?
I think it's wired into us, Think about it. When you need a surgeon, you're not calling up the okay one.
You want the absolute best.
Exactly. Same goes for pretty much everything. Choosing a restaurant, finding a plumber.
We instinctively gravitate towards the top performers.
Exactly. And Godin illustrates this with, of all things, ice cream flavors.
Ice cream. Okay, I'm listening.
Right. Vanilla and chocolate, they're like the kings, right?
They dominate.
And that's not an accident. Those top flavors, they capture most of the market, most of the profits. It's like this built-in advantage.
So it's not just about being slightly better, it's about blowing the competition out of the water.
Exactly. There's this thing called Zipf's law. It's a pattern that shows up everywhere. Music charts, best-selling books, even job applications.
Interesting. So it's like this universal law of success.
Pretty much. The rewards are skewed towards that #1 spot.
Okay, so becoming the best isn't just about stroking your ego. It's a strategic move for maximum success.
Nailed it. But here's the thing, getting to that top spot, it's going to involve what Godin calls the dip.
Oh, the dip. I think we've all been there.
It's that period, right, between starting something new and actually reaching that mastery level. It's often brutal.
Soul-crushing even.
And Godin, he gets it. He gives some really vivid examples. Like, think about organic chemistry.
Oh yeah, a rite of passage for pre-med students.
It's designed to be this filter, right? Only the most dedicated make it through.
Same goes for new businesses.
Yeah.
I've heard the failure rate is crazy high, especially in those early stages.
Right, like at those first trade shows and
Yeah.
even becoming a Fortune 500 CEO, you're looking at decades of work, setbacks, all that.
It's like this built-in test to weed out the people who aren't truly committed.
Yeah, it's a crucible.
Yeah.
But here's what separates the winners. They don't just survive the dip. They actually use it to their advantage.
Oh, interesting. So it's not about just gritting your teeth and bearing it.
Nope. It's about leaning in, using that resistance to refine your skills, to tweak your approach, and ultimately come out ahead.
Okay, so it's active, not passive. You're using that difficult period strategically.
Exactly. Now, Godin contrasts the dip with this other curve. He calls it the cul-de-sac.
Oh, that one sounds familiar, the cul-de-sac. It's that feeling of being stuck, putting in the work, but getting nowhere.
Exactly. The classic example is the dead-end job, right? Maybe it pays the bills, maybe it's even comfortable, but there's zero room for growth.
It's like running on a hamster wheel. You're putting in the effort, but you're not actually going anywhere.
Spot on. And the takeaway here is clear. If you're in a cul-de-sac, get out.
Don't waste your time, energy, all of that.
The opportunity cost is massive.
Okay, so we've got the dip tough, but potentially leads to amazing things, and the cul-de-sac runaway. But Godin, he throws in one more curve. The cliff.
Right. And this one, it's a bit more of a rare situation, but super important to understand.
Okay, I'm all ears.
The example he uses is cigarette addiction. The longer you smoke, the harder it gets to quit.
The downward spiral.
Exactly. But Godin is very clear that most things in life, most career paths, they don't follow this curve. The vast majority are dips or cul-de-sacs.
Phew, good to know. Okay, but then there's that urge, right? When we hit that dip, we want to diversify.
Oh, the siren song of doing all the things.
Right. I struggle with that.
We all do. And Godin, he has this brilliant analogy. Imagine a woodpecker. It can tap 20 times on 1,000 different trees and find nothing.
But 20,000 focus taps on one tree. Dinner time.
It really gets the point across, right? You've got to pick the right dip and go all in. become obsessed with conquering that one specific challenge.
Just makes me think about how we're always told to never quit, like it's a sign of weakness or
Yep,
something.
there's pressure, right, to just keep pushing no matter what.
Exactly. But Godin, he reframes it. He calls quitting a strategic go-up opportunity.
Because it's about freeing up your energy to
Yeah.
focus on what truly matters, what have the potential to take you to that top spot.
Okay, I'm starting to see it in a new light. Not giving up, but making a calculated move to elevate your chances of success.
You got it. However, he also warns against something he calls serial quitting.
Is that like jumping from one thing to the next, always looking for something better?
Perfect. It's like that thing we all do at the supermarket checkout. You switch lines thinking it'll be faster, but then...
And you end up even further behind.
Right. Godin applies this to entrepreneurs and career changers specifically.
Makes sense. So it's about having the discipline to actually stick with something, even when it gets uncomfortable.
And to see a worthwhile project through that dip to reap the rewards that are waiting on the other side.
This brings us to something that's maybe a little bit sensitive. The danger of average.
Oof. Yeah, settling for good enough.
And so many of us do, right? It's comfortable, it's familiar.
And Godin, he doesn't mince words. He says average is for losers. And look, he's not trying to be harsh, but to really wake people up.
So no more fence sitting.
Mm.
It's either quit or commit to being exceptional.
Right, and sometimes the biggest thing holding us back from making that clear decision is pride.
Pride. How does that play into quitting?
Godin uses a really powerful example, Richard Nixon and the Vietnam War. He argues that Nixon's pride, his unwillingness to admit a mistake, kept him in the war far longer than he should have been.
So pride can cloud our judgment, even in situations with massive consequences.
Absolutely. And it plays out in our own lives all the time, right?
Yeah.
Clinging to jobs, relationships, projects that are clearly not working, all because we're too proud to admit defeat.
More worried about saving face than actually reaching our goals.
Exactly. Godin challenges us to ask, is pride the only thing keeping me in this situation? Because hurting your pride, it's not fatal, and it often opens the door to something way better.
Such a good point. It also makes me think about sunk costs. That feeling of being trapped because we've already invested so much.
Ah, yes, the sunk cost fallacy. It's a classic trap.
You keep going because you've already put in so much time, money, energy. But Godin tells this amazing story about Michael Crichton. He quit medicine after graduating from Harvard Medical School and completing a prestigious fellowship.
Seriously, talk about defying expectations.
Right. But he realized that those past investments, they shouldn't dictate his future happiness. He had the courage to start over and chase his real passion, writing.
Powerful stuff. It shows that we always have the power to change course. But before we get too deep into the how of quitting, Godin gives us these 3 essential questions to ask before walking away from anything.
Okay, hit me with those questions. I'm ready.
First one, am I panicking?
So don't quit in a moment of pure emotion. Take a step back, breathe.
Right. The second question is, who am I trying to influence?
That's interesting. It makes me think about the difference between trying to influence like one person versus a whole market.
Exactly. What works on one might not work on the other.
Okay, and the final question.
The big one. Is the pain of this dip truly worth the potential reward?
Be brutally honest with yourself about the long game.
Absolutely. Before you make any decision about quitting, stop, breathe, and ask yourself those 3 questions. Make sure you're doing it for the right reasons.
This is blowing my mind, challenging so many of my assumptions about quitting.
I think that's the beauty of Godin's work. He forces us to really confront our beliefs and make choices that truly align with our goals.
And there's so much more to unpack. Can't wait to dig into the strategies, the nitty-gritty of how to actually quit well and with grace.
Coming up in part 2, so stick around. Welcome back. You know, one thing that's really stuck with me is this idea that strategic quitting, it's not about succumbing to failure.
Yeah, it's more like a calculated redirection.
Right. It's about choosing to invest your energy in something more promising, even if it means walking away from something that seems successful.
I like that. It's like choosing to climb a different mountain, one that actually has that peak you're looking for.
Exactly. It's recognizing when persistence actually becomes a liability.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Give me an example.
Godin tells this story about a guy named Doug. Sounds pretty ordinary, right?
Oh, yeah, I'm all ears.
Doug, he had this, well, what most people would consider a very successful career. He spent 14 years at a software company, climbing the ladder, managing teams, the whole 9 yards.
He was on the fast track.
Yeah, he was. But here's the thing. After a while, he started to realize he'd hit a ceiling. Like, there was no room for him to grow within that company anymore.
Ah, so he was in a cul-de-sac,
Yeah.
even though it looked pretty good from the outside?
Exactly. And that's the thing about cul-de-sacs, right? They can be comfortable, even deceptive.
Yeah, you get lulled into the sense of complacency, like, well, this is as good as it gets.
Right. But Doug, he didn't settle. He quit.
Wow, after 14 years, that's a big decision.
It is. But Godin argues that sometimes it's the smartest move you can make, because staying put, it just reinforces the limitations that other people have placed on you.
That's a powerful thought. Makes you wonder how many of us are in those comfy cul-de-sacs right now, just out of fear or inertia or just plain habit.
Probably more than we realize. We humans, we like the familiar even when it's not serving us anymore.
Okay, so then how do you know when it's really time to quit versus, just feeling the temporary discomfort of the dip?
That's the million-dollar question, right? You don't want to bail every time things get a little tough. That's giving up, not strategic quitting.
Right, right. It's a tricky balance.
It is, and it requires a lot of self-honesty, Are you actually committed to this path, or are you just afraid of what it means to quit?
This makes me think about all those times we're tempted to quit because our ego's bruised. Like when we feel like we messed up or we're not as good as we thought we were.
Ah, the ego trap. It's powerful stuff. But
Okay.
Godin's point is that quitting is not the same as failing.
There's a distinction there.
A huge one. Strategic quitting, it's a deliberate choice, not a sign of weakness. It's about assessing the situation and making a rational decision, not an emotional one.
So it's a strategic retreat, not a full-on surrender.
Exactly. I think a lot of us have this fear of quitting, this idea that it's somehow bad or wrong. But what if it's actually the best move you can make?
Yeah, it's like we need to reframe our whole thinking around it.
Totally. See it as a tool, a way to maximize your chances of success by putting your energy in the right places.
Okay, I'm on board. But then what happens after you quit? Like, what's the next step?
That's where rededication comes in.
Rededication. I haven't heard that one before.
It means that quitting isn't passive, It's not just about giving up and doing nothing. It's about taking that energy that you freed up and channeling it into something new, a new approach, a new strategy.
So it's like hitting the reset button, but with a clear purpose in mind.
Exactly. When you quit strategically, you're not admitting defeat. You're choosing to play a different game, one where you actually have a better chance of winning. But it does require quieting some voices in your head.
Oh, tell me about it. The voices are loud.
Right. And I'm talking about the voices of rationalization, justification, fear, the ones that tell you to stick with what's familiar, even when it's making you miserable.
Or the ones that tell you that quitting is a sign of weakness.
Exactly. Godin says to be skeptical of those voices, really examine your reasons, Are you making a strategic decision or are you just avoiding discomfort?
It's about being brutally honest with yourself.
100%. And this brings us back to something we touched on earlier, pride. How it can hold us back.
Right, like in the Nixon example. How his pride kept him in the Vietnam War far too long.
It's a powerful reminder that our ego can really blind us to the best course of action.
And we see it all the time, right, in our own lives. People staying in jobs or relationships that are clearly not working, all because they're too proud to walk away.
More worried about saving face than actually being happy.
Exactly. And Govin's challenge is pride the only thing keeping you in this situation? Because sometimes swallowing your pride is the key to finding a more fulfilling path.
It's true. And it makes me think about the sunk cost fallacy, too, how we can get so attached to what we've already invested.
Yeah, like I've already put in so much time and effort, I can't quit now.
Right. But Godin reminds us that those past investments, they shouldn't control our future. He tells this incredible story about Michael Crichton, remember? The guy who quit medicine after Harvard Medical School and a fellowship?
It's crazy. He basically walked away from years of education and training.
He did. But he realized he was miserable. And clinging to those sunk costs, it was just making things worse. He had the guts to start over and follow his passion for writing.
It's a powerful reminder that it's never too late to change course. But it also makes me think, how do you find that balance? You don't want to fall into the trap of quitting everything you start, right?
Absolutely. It's important to distinguish between, quitting a specific tactic that's not working versus quitting the whole strategy.
Can you give me an example? I'm not sure I follow.
Sure. Imagine a company launching a new product, right? They might try different marketing tactics.
Yeah.
Social media ads, print ads, influencer campaigns. If one of those isn't working, it makes sense to quit that tactic.
but not necessarily the entire product launch.
Right. It's about being flexible, adaptable, willing to change course, but without losing sight of that bigger goal.
So it's like the difference between a setback and a failure.
Exactly. And it's also about being patient, which can be tough these days. We're so used to instant gratification.
But real success, it takes time. It takes effort. You've got to be willing to push through those dips.
You got it. It's about playing the long game. And the people who are willing to stick with it, to persevere, they're the ones who achieve those extraordinary results.
This has been so insightful. I feel like I'm starting to see quitting in a whole new light.
That's what we're hoping for. But we're not done yet. There's a whole other side to this, a darker side. We need to talk about what Godin calls coping.
Coping. That sounds kind of ominous. Isn't coping like a good thing? We cope with difficult situations all the time.
Well, yeah, but Godin makes this distinction between, healthy coping mechanisms and just settling for mediocrity.
So it's like going through the motions, but not actually thriving.
Exactly. He says when you're just coping, you're not really living, you're just existing.
And that's a recipe for unhappiness.
Right. And he believes it's a waste of your time and energy. He's like, if you're not going to be exceptional at something, you might as well quit and focus on something else.
It's about recognizing when you're just treading water and making a conscious choice to either quit or fully commit to excellence.
You nailed it. And this is where self-awareness is so important. Are you actually passionate about this, or are you just coping to avoid the discomfort of quitting?
Oof. Tough question.
But it's a necessary one. Ask yourself, am I excited about this? Am I willing to put in the work to be truly great at this? If the answer is no, then walking away might be the bravest and most honest thing you can do.
That's a powerful thought. But there's still this stigma, right? This idea that quitting means you're a failure.
Oh, absolutely. But Godin, he wants to flip that script. He argues that quitting can actually be incredibly inspiring and motivating.
Wait, really? Inspiring.
Think about it. When you quit something that's not working, you're freeing yourself up to chase something you're truly passionate about. It's like closing a door to open a window to a whole new world of possibilities.
So quitting can actually be a catalyst for positive change.
Absolutely. It can help you get your priorities straight and focus on what truly matters.
It's like a course correction, a chance to realign yourself with your dreams.
Exactly. It's about reframing your perspective. Instead of seeing quitting as this big, scary failure, see it as a strategic move, a way to create a better life for yourself.
I like that. It takes the power back.
It does, and that kind of self-belief, it can be incredibly motivating. When you realize you have the power to walk away from anything that's not serving you, you become unstoppable.
It's about choosing yourself and your dreams.
You got it. And that brings us to one final but incredibly important point. We need to be smart about how we quit.
So it's not just about following your heart, it's about using your head too.
Precisely. And that's what we'll dive into in the final part of this episode. We'll explore Godin's counterintuitive advice on how to quit effectively, even when it feels impossible. We'll tackle those common misconceptions about quitting head on, and we'll leave you with some actionable steps you can take to start quitting strategically today.
I can't wait. This has been such an eye-opening conversation.
Me too. It's amazing how much power there is in understanding the art of quitting.
See you in part 3. All right, we're back. Ready to tackle those myths about quitting.
Let's do it. Time to debunk some of those deeply ingrained beliefs.
The one I hear all the time, especially in sports, is winners never quit.
Ah, yes. The classic Vince Lombardi quote. Sounds inspiring, right?
But it's not really the whole story.
It's misleading. Godin actually argues that the most successful people are often the best quitters. They've mastered the art of knowing when to walk away.
Because they can see the difference between a dip that's worth pushing through and a cul-de-sac that's going nowhere.
Exactly. They're not afraid to detach from something that's not aligned with their ultimate vision, even if it means facing some short-term discomfort.
And then there's that other myth. Quitting means you're weak.
Oh, that one's a biggie. It's like we're conditioned to believe that quitting is this sign of weakness, a character flaw.
Yeah, so shameful.
But Godin says strategic quitting actually takes a lot of strength and courage.
You have to be willing to face your fears, question your assumptions, and make those tough calls.
And those calls aren't always popular.
It's about having the self-awareness to realize you're on the wrong path, and then the guts to actually change course.
Which leads us to another myth, that quitting equals failure. Like they're the same thing.
We're taught to believe that if we quit, we've somehow failed ourselves, failed our dreams.
But there's a huge difference. Godin is very clear about this. Strategic quitting is about making a choice, a deliberate choice, to move towards something better. Failing is about giving up when there are still options, or quitting so often that you basically sabotage yourself.
So it's not about the outcome itself, it's about the reasoning behind the decision.
You got it. And then there's this idea that quitting should be easy. Like it should be this magical moment of clarity where you just know it's time to move on.
We expect it to be a clean break, no mess, no drama.
Right. But quitting, it can be messy, it can be emotional, it can be full of doubt. It's a process, not just a single event.
You have to untangle yourself from something,
Mhm.
and that takes time and effort.
Exactly. Be patient with yourself. Don't beat yourself up if you're feeling conflicted. And remember to have a plan, something to support you through that transition, both financially and emotionally.
Because even strategic quitting, it can be a big shakeup.
It can. And having that safety net in place, it makes a huge difference. But let's get practical. What does Godin actually recommend for quitting effectively?
Yeah, give us the actionable steps.
One of his core principles is honesty. Be upfront with yourself. Be upfront with the people who are going to be affected by your decision.
So no ghosting, no disappearing acts.
Right. If you're quitting your job, give your boss ample notice. Explain your reasons clearly and respectfully.
Don't burn bridges.
Exactly. Be prepared to answer questions, address concerns, all while staying professional.
It's about leaving a good impression, even if you're excited to move on.
And this goes for anything you're quitting. A job, a relationship, a project. Handle it with integrity. It's about respecting yourself and the other people involved.
So much better than just vanishing into thin air.
Godin talks about closing loops. It's important to have those tough conversations even when they're uncomfortable.
It's not just about protecting your reputation. It's about acknowledging the impact your decision has on other people.
Exactly. Now, another crucial piece is timing.
Timing. So there's a right time and a wrong time to quit.
There is Godin's advice here might surprise you. He says, quit when you're strong, not when you're at your weakest point.
Interesting. So not in the heat of the moment, not when you're feeling overwhelmed or defeated.
Right. Quit when you've thought it through, when you have a plan, when you're mentally and emotionally prepared for what's next.
It's about being proactive, not reactive. Making a choice from a place of power, not desperation.
Exactly. Which brings us to another key point. Quit for the right reasons. Not because you're scared or because you're lazy, but because it truly is the best strategic move you can make.
So no more quitting just because it's easier than sticking it out.
Right. Quit because you've honestly assessed the situation and you know it's time to move on.
Quit to create space for something better.
That's it. Quit to pursue those things that truly light you up, the things that have the potential to bring you real joy and fulfillment.
It's like decluttering your life to make room for the things that really matter.
I love that analogy. It's about making space for something extraordinary.
This whole conversation has been a game changer. I'm seeing quitting in a whole new light.
I think that's the power of Godin's work, right? It challenges our assumptions and helps us see things from a fresh perspective.
So if we had to distill it down, what's the biggest takeaway from the dip?
I think it's this. Quitting isn't the enemy of success. It can actually be the key to unlocking it. When you understand the power of strategic quitting, when you learn to embrace the right dips and walk away from those dead ends, you open yourself up to reaching your full potential, to becoming the best in the world at what you do.
And remember, the world is defined by you. It could be your industry, your community, your own personal goals. Find your dip, the one worth conquering, and pour your heart and soul into it.
Beautifully said. And if you're feeling stuck, if you're facing a tough decision, remember those 3 questions from Godin. Are you panicking? Who are you trying to influence? And is the pain of this dip worth the potential reward?
Those are gold. And remember, quitting isn't a sign of weakness. It's a sign of intelligence. It's about making conscious choices that empower you to achieve your dreams.
So well said. It's been a pleasure exploring this with you. Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into the art of strategic quitting.
I hope this has given everyone some food for thought. Until next time.